guys, welcome to the latest podcast of Yarn and Black. Today I've got a really great friend of mine on, Caressa, and I'll introduce you to her in a minute. But I first would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I'm coming in from. I'm calling in from Baldwin Q on the land of the Wurundjeri people, and I want to pay respect to elders past, present, and those future leaders that are actually coming through that are going to help guide us into the future. Now, without further ado, I have got one of my favorite people, believe it or not, and I haven't caught up with Caressa for a little while. But Caressa, how are you?
I'm good, AJ. Thanks.
No, thank you for joining us. I might just throw straight over to you to just introduce yourself, say who you are and where you're from.
Yeah, no worries. So my name's Caressa Murphy. I am a Gumbayngirr woman, but I now live on Dharawal country in the Illawarra of New South Wales.
Yep. And how long have you been living there?
We moved here at the end of 2015, so like 9 years.
Yeah. And when we met at the Murrah program, what year was that?
That was 2015.
2015, yeah. I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure you moved just after we finished the program.
probably. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a huge shift in life. And definitely for the better, because even during the Murray program, we had a big family dispute. So yeah, 2015 was huge when I look back on it now. Wow.
Yeah. So tell us what you do.
So I am a fashion designer and a teacher, and I've pulled all my skills together into two now different businesses that I run. So in one of my businesses, which is Caressa Designs, I design and make children's clothing and accessories, and I do a little bit of adults clothing as well. I was doing women's clothing when I first met AJ, but I couldn't make a sustainable business. So I did a bit of a pivot. I actually walked away from it and went on my cultural journey, which was really important for me at the time because my mum is stolen. I did that. And then when I came back to fashion, because it was a real, am I supposed to be doing this? What am I doing? Where am I going? And I just put it all out into the universe and said, look, if it's supposed to be for me, it'll call me back. And that's exactly what it did. So yeah, I pivoted across into children's clothing and I haven't been able to keep up. And from that, we've unfortunately just lost our major source of income for the first 6 months of this year, with our black markets in Sydney closing down to do a bit of a restructure.
Yeah.
So that's pushed me into a space of going, well, where am I going to earn money? Because even though I've got a background in teaching, I've got an almost 2-year-old and I really don't want to have to return to work. So I'm trying to find ways to keep that income going, being at home and being a business owner. So one of the other things that I'm absolutely passionate about is the fact that we don't have a First Nations owned and led supply chain within the fashion industry. So that's my new step. And so I've just created a new company called Made on Country. And that basically tells you everything in those 3 simple words. It's a space to train local mob in the industry to build those skills and then to take on other designers and make their stuff here rather than having it sent overseas. And I understand with that also comes a lot of education and training, which is exactly perfect for me and who I am and what I'm passionate about. So yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah. And both your businesses will put links in on the bottom of the YouTube so people can actually contact you as well.
Yeah,
And
great.
websites and stuff. Made on Country is interesting because we often hear that people look at Aboriginal art or clothing and they see it not made in Australia, and that turns them off a little bit because they think that it's been illegally done. But the reality is that, as you were saying, it's really hard to get stuff made in Australia.
I was in the industry when there was that shift from everything being made in Australia to then being made offshore. Um, and we lost so many people with the skills and the knowledge. And so I saw that shift happen. And now I've seen the shift where people want it to come back and to be authentic. I had a blow up with a fella at a market, and he said, "Oh, where's all your stuff made?" And I said, "Well, I make most of it myself, and I do, but for testing new products and whatnot, even just to print on t-shirts, which I don't know if you can see, but my rainbow serpent, which is my design, I print it. But the t-shirt, it was really hard to find something that was Australian made and cost effective. So I just did some test ones buying the cheap stuff at Big W. And I was really honest and I said, look, this one's made in Bangladesh. Made overseas. I don't want to hear anything more, and stormed off. And I'm like, well, if you don't want to have that respect to have that conversation, because there's stories connected behind it and challenges. And when it comes back to, it's a beautiful story that links back into mob and our struggles through colonization, for the fact that we can story tell and pull different elements and aspects. But, a lot of the things are connected, but in totally different scopes and avenues. But, look, there's always a struggle. There's always something that you've got to learn to build on, to then grow and be challenged with, and then to move on. But all of that journey, it's all life. And yeah, there's always a yarn for something and a connection somewhere if people are willing to listen.
Yeah. What inspires you to create art?
It's got to a lot of my sewing has got to do with healing. So I started sewing at a very, very young age. So the stories are, my adopted grandmother, she had this really long table that we would all sit at. And it wasn't really like the dining table, but it was just the table. So she had her Elna sewing machine down one end of the table, and herself and her husband bought me a battery operated little sewing machine, kids one, which was at the other end of the table. And the stories are that when she would stop and go and get a cup of tea, she'd come back and find me with my hands above, because I couldn't reach it, trying to press the pedals, and I couldn't really see over the top of what I was doing, and that I would sew. And so the stories are that I used to make like Barbie dolls, clothing, and stuff for my Cabbage Patch dolls, and that evolved into knitting and crocheting, and so a lot of the time when I sit at my sewing machine, it's just me. So sometimes I get healing and sometimes I argue with myself. And then sometimes, I also think back over things that have happened in life, which can be very empowering, or it can actually put me into a very dark space as well. It just really depends. So I sort of sit and sew and just go through and think. And I'm probably lucky that I don't have employees, because they probably think that I'm nuts, because sometimes, some words come out that I just go, oh, why did you do that then? And and if somebody was around me, they wouldn't understand the context, because the conversation's happening in here, not, here. But yeah, look, it's really healing for me. I also do paint. I haven't painted for quite some time, but it is something that I really want to go back into, because I want to create my own fabric, to be able to tell my own story. And when I started my art journey, that was all about discovering culture.
Yeah.
And that was something that just flowed out of me. When I was in fashion school, I couldn't draw. And when I say I couldn't draw, it was because what they wanted me to draw were figures and poses and bodies, and then clothes on top of that, which there was no connection to, because it was an image.
Yeah.
As soon as I walked into my Aboriginal art class, I said to my teacher, don't expect anything, because I knew that I wasn't any good at this. And he said to me, look, there's a pencil, like a box of pencils. Just draw that. And I'm like, oh, really? Okay. So I did that and I showed it to him and he goes, oh, what about the shade? And I've gone, oh, of course, like, art school shading and all the rest. So I did that and he goes, all right, flip over the page and start drawing. And I'm like, what am I supposed to draw? Like, I've never drawn something from a blank space before. And I don't remember how I started, but something just kind of kicked over. And it became a very spiritual space because not only did I start drawing shapes and lines that then created images, but the story started to download. It was almost like not like a whisper, but it was just like knowledge that was just downloading automatically. So my very first picture was of these ant hills, and there was 3 of them. And you think of an ant hill, it's a home. What space is home? Or space, home is where the heart is. So there was a love heart drawn in each of the ant hills. Inside of that was nature and nurture, caring. So there was all leaves in each of them. And then I started drawing like, the tunnels and then the little separate chambers and then the eggs. It was really important that I drew like the egg room where the eggs would sit. And then it was amazing because then the knowledge that came through about the egg, I don't know if it's scientific, if anybody could ever prove it, but the knowledge that was downloaded was that when the ants' eggs are created, the brain is the first thing that comes through. Whereas with humans, it's the heart. And there has been scientific evidence that's backed that up. And so, therefore, everything that comes out of ants is always stimulated from the mind, from the brain. And I was like, wow. And again, I don't know if this is true or not, but to me, it's true. And so that knowledge came through, and then it was always about the connection, the connection to home, the connection to each other. And I thought it was really beautiful. So that came through, and I painted it. And then, went on to the next painting, and the same sort of process happened. So a blank canvas, and then painting these lines that turned into shapes, that turned into images, that then you've got this story that downloads. And it's phenomenal. I actually painted one of my favorite paintings, which is called Spirit Tree. I started doing my Gumbayngirr language online, and they were talking about the story. And like I said, I grew up very disconnected from my culture, still am to a point, but a lot more connected than what I was. And when we started talking about this story, it was my story that I had painted, and this was 10 years on. And I couldn't believe it, that story was actually from my ancestors. And it just blew me away. So I'm really excited to go back into painting, to reconnect and have those stories. And then I can't imagine what I'm going to feel when it turns into fabric and then turns into a dress or a shirt or whatever the opportunities are from there. I'm so excited. Yeah.
Wow. So you did go to fashion school. Where was that? What did you study?
So that was at East Sydney TAFE when it was around. Then they shifted over to Ultimo. So, in the day, this is back in the 2000s, they, held the crown as being the best fashion school in Australia. And I studied fashion design, and I was only 17 at the time and so very passionate, but I stuffed up because I didn't complete a unit. And I sort of fobbed it off, like, oh, yeah, that's fine. Don't care. I'll still get my certificate. And then it was like, no, hard, fast learning.
Yeah.
Actually, no, you can't get your certificate. This is the
Yeah.
real world, sweetie, like not your 17-year-old version.
Yeah.
Um, so then the next year, because I applied to move on into, I think it was like a diploma or something
Yeah.
like that at the time. Um, so I applied, but the drawing was what really stuffed me up.
Yeah.
So I didn't get into fashion design. And then my world was like, well, what am I going to do now? So I stayed in the same college, even though I had to travel like an hour and a half every day to get there. And I could have done it closer to home, but I was staying there for like the prestige of the school. Um, and I just did like fashion manufacturing. It was in that course that there was like a job advertisement that went out for somebody to work 1 day a week, almost like work experience, but it was
Yeah.
paid. And from that was my foot in the door into industry while I was still studying. And then at the end of the year, I went full time.
Oh, wow.
So it was almost like my ducks lined up in a row.
Yeah.
And I got to learn everything from the ground up. And it was a small little, almost like a family business.
Yeah.
So yeah, I got everything hands on, which is kind of what I'm trying to also facilitate within my business as well, because that was an amazing way to learn. And such a connected space as well for growth. And I really want to bring that across into my business as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So from there, you then how long is your business been around for?
Officially,
Yeah.
officially, I've had my ABN registered since 2009.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like for me, um, I take a couple of steps, put myself out there, dip my toe in the water, and then go, oh, I don't know that I can do this, and turn around and run backwards.
Yeah.
And then build the confidence up, try again. And so I've kind of been on that roller coaster for a number of years. So, hey, I'm like resilience queen. um, but it's tough when you have to do it on your own, and
Yeah.
it's like you're wholly and solely responsible for everything that goes on within business. And I think the fashion industry as well is a challenging space to be in. And I haven't not had great experiences. I've had some amazing opportunities to showcase. I was one of the designers for Australian Indigenous Fashion Week, which was in 2014. And I actually had two collections that I designed for my own. And then I designed for a collection with a remote community up in Arnhem Land called Butborough Designs. And at the time, they were the only ones licensing their artworks to Spotlight. So Spotlight sponsored me to fly up there and be in community for 2 days. And I tell you what, it was like life-changing. It was, me, city girl, never experienced anything else. And then being within that remote community, which is actually a closed community. So you can't just drive through when you feel like it. You have to have that invitation. It was such a culture shock.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it opened my mind to other opportunities. And that's, I think, where the education and teaching and, even mentoring sort of space opened up for me. And I sort of thought, wow, like I've collected all of this knowledge over all of these years. I have an opportunity now where I can share that, where I can give back. And like, again, these sort of hiccups in the road where sort of put it out there, but it sort of didn't really happen. Funding wasn't available at the time. So you sort of come back and go, okay, maybe that wasn't the right thing, but that's okay because something else is coming instead. And now, to focus all of that now into this business made on country, I just sort of feel like this is exactly what I want to do, but couldn't do back then. But now I'm at this level. I'm more educated. I'm older. I've got more life lessons under my belt. I've got these amazing connections that I didn't have, 10 years ago thought I had, but really didn't. So I really feel like I'm in one of the best spaces now to be able to live the life that I've always dreamed of.
Yeah. Did you have any role models growing up?
Um, I, yeah, I sort of feel so again, because I didn't grow up in community,
Yeah.
um, and I grew up very disconnected. A lot of my role models were the typical Australian,
Yeah.
or white sort of
Yeah.
people, because that's what I saw. Um, and that was what was relatable in a sense because I didn't have that community connection.
Yeah.
So my role models have absolutely changed.
Yeah.
And that again has been that life's journey, um, to kind of go, okay, this is the beginnings, and this is where it all started, and this is how it can happen. But it doesn't actually have to be that way, because now that these connections have come through, it's like, no, I don't want to live my life how I lived it in the beginnings. I want to live my life this way because this is right. This is, connection and beautiful and how it should be. So yeah, look, I did have role models, but they are not even on my aspirational level anymore.
Yeah.
Um, and now it's really changed. So yeah, even that space has changed because I was sort of like, oh, I want to be like a Gucci or a Prada, and I've always looked at that, European side of things, but now I'm just like, no, we need to be highlighting mob. We need to be, regaining that space and decolonizing that space and really having that space for empowerment. And I'm so there and I so want to do this. This is so exciting. And I think it's even more exciting than being on a, Parisian runway.
Did you always have dreams about being on the runway?
Yeah. And then I did it.
Yep.
I've done a couple of runway shows,
Yep.
community and, slightly bigger, like at Australian Indigenous Fashion Week.
What's it
Um,
like seeing your designs on the models on the runway?
so what's really funny about that is that we were working backstage. We didn't see the screens. So we
Oh,
didn't
wow.
actually see it until the photographs come out. And we were promised a lot, but it didn't get delivered. So I think I've got maybe 3 photos of my designs on models,
Oh,
and
wow.
it's just really different. Like it's not that. I think if I had the whole collection, maybe it would be a different experience. So therefore I'd kind of be like, oh, it's amazing. But when you sort of only get like 1 or 2, you kind of go, oh, that's a little bit disappointing. But not to say that I haven't seen, other pieces. I think for me, the Deadlies were my realm.
Yeah.
That was where the excitement was. So my first dress, which was my rainbow serpent story,
Yeah.
and the first dress, and that was my connection to culture. So as a child, the rainbow serpent story in school, that was my first connection to culture. And that story stayed with me. So it was really important for me that the rainbow serpent dress was one of the first dresses that I did. That was more important because it was my cousin that modeled the dress for me. Um, I spent, oh my goodness, I did a lot of hand sewing on that dress. So I was working 14 hours a day, 6 days a week for about 6 weeks to get this dress completed. Um, that was my highlight. Absolutely. And then to have, so there was like judges. It was a design competition. And it wasn't connected to the front of the Deadlies. We had like a separate, it was called the sunset ceremony. So it was at the back of the opera house. So, it was very prestigious. It was, you know, I think Uncle Troy, I call him Uncle because he is one of my uncles, Uncle Troy Casadale, he was playing. And so, and like, you're rubbing shoulders with, Aboriginal celebrities and people winning awards. So that was my highlight more so than anything else. And yeah, it was really proud. And, look, my dress was bloody beautiful.
Yeah.
And
I remember you showing us photos of it. I remember you
yeah,
showing photos of it. It was absolutely gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous.
yeah, yeah. And I had people, sitting around me when they were showing the little flicks of it, this is what happened previous in the day. And I actually had one of the brothers sitting in front of me. He turned around and he said, "Oh, sis, you should have won." And I'm just like, "Oh, thank you." So it was that acknowledgement. It's like that was the total package for me, 100%.
Yeah. Now you're talking a little bit about learning about culture as you were growing up. How old were you when you first started to embrace culture?
Um, I don't really know that there was like a pivotal
Yeah.
point. Um, we always knew we were Aboriginal. We always had that story of, my grandparents not being able to have adopted grandparents not being able to have children and then adopting four. Um, and they all came from different families and different mobs and different tribes, Um, so we always knew and we always identified. Mum was the first of the four
Yeah.
to find her family, and that was really frowned upon. And even to the point that my adopted grandmother threatened my mother and said, "If you need to choose your family or us. And
Yeah.
if you choose them, we're going to take your daughter."
Yeah.
And that's not exactly what ended up happening, but it kind of did.
Yeah.
So, in a certain way, and I'm not taking this away from people who were stolen, but I feel like I was also stolen from my mother and therefore from any connection that she made, which then hindered my connection. Um, so yeah, I don't think that there was like a pivotal point because I always identified, and people who I identified to accepted me.
Yeah.
But I think it was always sort of like on the periphery. My auntie was the next one that went into culture, and she started painting, and got a lot of criticism from the adopted family of you shouldn't be doing that and all the rest of it. So I was always held back from exploring, um, because of that negative, voices from family, because that's all that we knew. Like that was our family. Um, so I think maybe the Aboriginal art course was kind of the space that I could walk into, be free in openly identifying and then being accepted. And then all of a sudden, bang, culture hit. Like I was saying, those stories were just downloading in the most beautiful, perfect way ever. And then that was like my realization of this is how it should be. And
Yeah.
this is how it can be because this is who I am. And so it was just about embracing that. And I guess in a way, I was just lucky that I was really good at what I was doing. And there was a certain level of acceptance that wasn't there with my auntie.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe I think maybe that's the time that it happened for me.
There's a lot of people, trying to connect with culture, but don't even know where to start. What advice would you give to people that want to know more, but just don't know where to begin?
I think it's a really personal journey. So, like for me, I was able to go into a space. Like I said, I went into an art class and I was there going, I'm not an artist. um, but then I've also worked as a tour guide and I've worked on country and been in that beautiful space where I've had nature, but then I've also had amazing mentors that have shared their story and traditional owners, that have shared their story of the land and being able to connect with that. And then finding out that, one of the most amazing uncles is best friends with my nan's brother, my grandfather, and just going, wow, I'm actually part of this phenomenal family that has, because he was a lawman, and just going, wow, like we've just got so much. So Yeah, look, it's a really personal thing for everybody, but I think it's like, again, it's like the more that you put out there, you sort of just wait and see which way that your ancestors want to guide you, you know? So for some people, it might be picking up a paintbrush. For other people, it might be, you know, being in nature. It might be, you know, connecting with local mob, doing a tour on country and just going and listening and learning about the local land that you live on, um, and just trying to find, you know, that connection. And it's not easy. Like sometimes it's easy or easier. And other times it's a little bit difficult. So you sort of might have a couple of stumbles and trips along the way, but that's also part of the lesson too.
Got a question for you. We talk about elders in our community. What makes a good elder?
Oh, what makes a good elder? Somebody that listens, um, but somebody who has that empathy and has that understanding. Um, I think about one of the elders, you know, traditional owner here, who was very strongly connected to my grandfather. And one of his sayings was, you know, you got to give it to, oh, sorry, I got to remember it. What is it? You got to give it to receive it.
Yeah.
So that has always stuck with me, that saying. Um, Obviously, you know, the knowledge and the wisdom is fantastic. But then at the same time, it's I think it's just that humility. I think that's really important within our, you know, if you've got an elder that is just really humble and you know, I can think of some amazing elders that, you know, they're not always the ones talking on the microphones. You know, they're the ones that sit back and have time. Oh my goodness, the ones that have time for you, you know, and sometimes they just let you talk and then they'll come in and interject. And then you sort of walk away from that and you go, yeah. And then other times you've got elders that just share knowledge so freely, and that's time for you to listen. And yeah, um, yeah, look, I guess we have such a diversity of elders and they have a hard job to do, you know, and they in turn have their own diverse, um, you know, responsibilities to community as well. So, yeah, a big shout out to elders.
There's a couple of buzzwords that are going around quite a lot recently, and one of them is reconciliation. We've heard about it. What does reconciliation mean to you?
Um, I think I was listening to one of your podcasts earlier, and
Oh, good, you're the person that listens to them.
and likes and everything. Yeah, that's me.
Yeah,
Subscribe, no. um, and look, yeah, I don't think that we've reached it. And I
yeah,
think that we are moving beyond what the initial form of reconciliation was ever supposed to mean. And I think that's because we've evolved. And I think that's because maybe white Australia, Second Nation Australia hasn't caught up or hasn't stayed a part of it. And I think maybe the agenda for, not for us, but for them may have shifted.
yeah,
So I don't know. Look, I think that there's lots of amazing spaces that are achieving that. But I mean, I sort of sit in a space where I live, where, you know, we still sort of, I'm still very cautious about what I say and who I say it to, because some people are very open and then other people are very closed. So I don't know that we're sort of ever going to move past this. I'd love for us, you know, as a nation to move past it. And maybe that's not in the form of reconciliation, but I think that there's a lot of truth that needs to be spoken. But if people don't hear it, then we can't achieve it.
I like that. That's going to make people think. That's going to make people think, but you are right. Now, I'm watching the time, but I do have another question I want to throw at you, and that is something remarkable happened in the last couple of years, and that's you became a mum.
For the second time.
Second time, yes.
Raising two others as well in between, yes.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how the young one's going right at the moment, or talk about all your kids.
Yeah, okay. So I have my daughter who is almost 20.
Yes.
Scary. And I know I don't look that old. Everybody tells me I don't look that old. So thank you. Thank you, my Black ancestors, for the beautiful, genetics. And then my husband has his son, who will be 17 at the end of this year. And we are full-time carers, so I'm his mum. And then I've also raised my younger sister, who is older than my daughter, but only by 15 months. So those two grew up more like sisters, and I was sort of almost like second mum. And now I've got Bub, my little baby, who's almost 2 years old. And he was a IVF pregnancy. So that in its own journey was a roller coaster. And a lot of people say, oh, what's the age gap like? And I'm like, that's how I grew up, so I don't know any different. And that usually shuts the conversation, but it's just like it doesn't mean to shut the conversation. I'm happy to keep talking about it. But yeah, it's challenging because he doesn't sleep very well. And all of my other children, you lay them out in front of the telly, pop a bottle in their mouth, and within 10 minutes they'd be asleep. With this one, you can try for 2 hours trying to put him down to sleep, and even then he's like wide awake, and then wakes up still at the age of 2, 4 times a night. So yeah, he's a challenge.
How do you manage motherhood with your whole business? What's the secret?
There is no secret. I don't. It's hard. It's really, really hard. So my husband works full time. He was a nurse. He's now been promoted, so his hours are longer. His days are even, frequently away. So the business has had to sort of go on pause. We couldn't get childcare for him. Like I said, he's almost 2. We only just got childcare for him at Christmas time last year. So it's kind of just been like finding spaces and finding gaps and doing the best that I can with the time that I've got. And, it's not the best practice, but definitely not the best practice at all, far from it. But, I would ignore my burnout. I would not make myself the priority. It was always, family came first. And then we've all been on a bit of a string of illnesses. Nothing major, just, viral infections that just don't go away.
Yeah.
Like, I started to get these viruses just before Christmas, and it's been about 3 months, and it's just this constant string. So I'm seeing that that's not sustainable. I'm seeing that that's not healthy. And so, yeah, it's pulling back and reviewing. I've had some fantastic mentors that are helping me with my time management and helping me understand that I need some self-care and I need some time for me. So yeah, it is shifting. It's not there yet, far from it. But again, it's kind of like that journey and that balance. And I do feel country's calling me. So I am hoping that with that inspiration, I'll be able to come away and move into my next phase, which is, my painting again, reconnecting with that painting. Where I'm going to find the time, I absolutely have no idea. But when it's meant to be, and when it's calling you and it's pulling you, it in your gut and in your heart that, like, I don't need to be on the machines today. I need to be pulling the paintbrushes out. So I'm kind of a bit of a go with the flow type of person. And I think my mentor is kind of a bit like, you need to time manage your go with your flow. It's all part of the elements of being a creative person, I guess. Or that's what I'm telling my mentor anyway.
I'm just watching the time, but I've got one final question for you, and that is, what would you like people to walk away with from our yarn this morning?
Oh, that's a tricky question. Look, there's obviously there's been a lot of different knowledge and information that's been shared, and I'm sure that there's certain parts that resonate with people. So, just whatever calls to you, whatever calls to you, you know, just follow that, or whatever inspires you, follow that and see where it leads.
No, that's beautiful. Hey, you know how much I really love you, and it is good to catch up, and we do catch up every now and then, like maybe once every 18 months or so. We might have a phone call message.
Or when you send me a message that's not meant for me.
Yeah, I've done that a few times. Because you're on my favorite list. That's why I hit. There's a couple of favorite people, and you get the message when I say favorites. But it is, we just going back, we did the Murrah program nearly 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
And we've come a long way, and you've come a long way as well. And we're probably very different people. But I think what people don't realize is that I still contact some of the Murrah people as well, that we were a pretty close-knit group.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I wanted to say hi to any of the Murrah people that are watching as well. Look, I know we have to go, so I want to thank Caressa for joining us today. Thank you very much. And guys, I'll see you at the next podcast. So see you later. Bye.